So let's dive right into it. We were up to, I think, page 113 in this book right here, opening the Tanya. And we were speaking about how to awake our love for God by contemplating his creation. And the more we contemplate any aspect of his creation, it doesn't have to be the Grand Canyon. It doesn't even have to be, Camelback Mountain. It could just be the smile of a child or anything like that. Then the more we will ignite that love for God, that will come specifically from the mind. Now, speaking of the mind versus the heart, we also spoke a lot about how the mind has to be in the driver's seat in life in general, much more than the heart. The heart creates all sorts of emotions that are fleeting, that come and go, that are blurry, that are unstable, while the mind can analyze and dissect, and therefore also be able to better grasp life in general and grasp our direction and our focus of life with much more clarity. So we're up to, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're up to the bottom of page 113 here in this book. And I think we're in the very last part that says, in turn, his heart will glow with an intense love, like burning coals. Does anyone want to read? Yeah, anyone? Please, and
okay,
okay. We have this book. I know that not many of you have this book, but of course we'll try to speak loudly and clearly, and at the same time explain every word of this book. So bottom of page 113 for those of you who have it. Okay, we're in with the words that start, in turn his heart will glow with glow. In turn his heart will glow. Sorry.
In turn, his heart will glow with an intense love like burning coals, with craving, desire, passion, and a yearning soul toward the greatness of the blessed infinite. Shall I continue to the
Yes, let's explain. Yeah, those were the words of the Tanya. Right.
The same truth contemplated from a different angle produces a love of God, the desire to connect and fuse with his great and magnificent being. The four expressions the author uses, I'm going to have to help me, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Hashka, Hafitza, Teshuka, and Nefesh Shocheka, craving, desire, passion, and a yearning soul, are various synonyms for love found in the writing of our sages. Hashika implies a striving, a gravitation towards something. Hafitza describes a more internal movement, not desire as it relates to something that is outside of the person, but desire as it is to itself. Teshuka and Nefesh Shokacha are burning sensations in the soul, longings that fill the soul and compel it to the point that it cannot be otherwise.
Right.
Rabbi Shmuel Grunam quotes Rabbi Hillel from Parich as explaining the four terms as four aspects of fire in the divine soul, corresponding to the four colors in a flame.
Right. Okay, yeah, it's beautiful. So there are four colors in a flame. There's the color white, yellow, blue, and red. And these really correspond to the four types of expressions of the soul. It's interesting. We speak of the soul as a very abstract thing, but quite the opposite. The soul, in a way, gives us very physical expressions. I don't know, by many of us, it expresses itself in many different ways. But sometimes we cry, literally cry. Again, it's a very physical expression. We cry for no reason. Does that ever happen to you? That you cry for no reason? Or sometimes we have this sense of void, of emptiness, that all of a sudden jumps at us. Where does that come from? Sometimes we also have this spiritual awakening. It could happen in a positive way, right? I gave two negative examples, but in a positive way, sometimes we wake up in the morning and we're awakened. Wow, we feel fresh. We feel like We want to conquer the world out of nowhere for no apparent reason. Where does that come from? All these expressions, and there's many, many more, but all these expressions, of course, come from the soul itself. The soul that is an integral part of each and every one of us. We're made of body and soul. We speak about this. This is why this class is called the soul class. Now, the soul in the words of King Solomon is compared to the flame of God. Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. We've mentioned this. That's why, for example, during a yahrzeit, we light a yahrzeit candle to represent the soul of the loved one that we are praying for. Because what best represents the soul is a candle, or is that flame of the candle. Now, if you look at a candle, you'll see that there are 4 types, not just 4 colors, but 4 types of longing. And therefore, Kabbalah also speaks of 4 types of longing that the soul has. There is a longing that craves for something very realistic, like I'm craving for whatever it is, an ice cream. That could be a soulful expression. I'm craving for something. And that's the lowest type, or the lowliest type of that craving of the soul. And that's chasheka. Then there's chafetza, which describes more of an internal movement, like Rabbi Stein says, which is something that, again, cannot be explained, cannot be defined. I don't know, all of a sudden I'm crying. I don't really know why. That cry in and of itself, again, speaks of that flame that is rooted in this movement upward. It doesn't really know why it's moving upward. Sometimes the fire wants to burn something, and that's chasheka, that's that first level. It wants to connect to something very physical. Sometimes, just because the flame it needs to move. And that movement inwardly is that chafetza, is that second type of longing. Then you have the third and the fourth, which are put together, nefesh and teshuka and nefesh shokeka, are longings of the fire, really, which is when you look at the flame, it's almost in a poetic way. You look at the flame and you say, wow, the flame must feel so lonely because it came from a much bigger fire. And that bigger fire in Kabbalah is God. When we look at our soul and we feel sometimes our soul, like I said, for no reason, we have the spiritual awakening for no reason. That's because the fire says to itself, our soul says to itself, I'm so lonely in this world. And part of the reason I'm lonely is because I'm disconnected from heavens, disconnected from the big fire, disconnected from God himself. I wish I could detach myself from my own wax, sometimes from my own body, and connect to that big fire, which is God, go back to heaven. You know, this connects to the deeper idea, what the Talmud says, that when we are sent down to this world, the soul rebels. The soul goes on a very, very strong demonstration against God and angels that try to send our soul to this world. Why? Because it knows that this world has a lot of evil. There's a lot of temptations, has a lot of obstacles and challenges, physical and spiritual challenges. And their soul, therefore, says to God, no, please, leave me in heaven. I'm fine here. I'm happy here. I'm satisfied. My fire is part of your fire. And I don't need to go down to this evil world. And now God can't force the soul, the Talmud says, right? God doesn't force. God is a good educator. He doesn't force anything. So how is the soul eventually convinced? The soul is given a tour by an angel in this world. And it's given a tour, and the angel says, fine, I'm willing to take this tour, but I'm not as a tour. It's like visiting a different country. I'm going to visit a different country, but I'll be back to my home. I'm not going to be convinced. The soul takes this tour, but the angel is clever enough to show the soul some good people in this world, and good actions in this world, and people doing good deeds, and people studying Torah. Who knows? Maybe there's a soul right now looking at our Zoom, and the angel is using us, each and every one of us, to convince the soul that doesn't want to go down. Who knows? Maybe this is happening at this moment. But the soul then sees all this good action and all the tremendous light that can be produced by the soul, and now it's tempted. It says to the angel, you know what? I'm having second thoughts. I want to go down to this world to be able to create this light that these people are creating, a light that I cannot create in heaven. Remember, the soul in heaven is passive. It's not given any mission. It's not charged with changing the world. It's just part of its big fire. when it sees that it can create a light that in the heavens the soul can't create, then it says to the angel that's giving her this tour, you know what, maybe I do want to go. And the angel convinces her through this tour. But then the soul makes a pact with God himself, saying, you know what, I was tempted. Thank you for giving me this tour. But the only condition I'll have in me accepting to go down to this world is if you promise me, God, that I'll be like those good people that the angel showed me. And God promises that. And the soul also, on the other hand, has to promise that it will stick to staying good, to being good, to creating good. And that's how the soul eventually comes down. That's how each and every one of us here in the Zoom call, each and every one of us here in this planet, the 7 billion people here in this planet, that's how we came down. Our soul came down, and we promised to God, and God promised to us that we'll be good and that we'll stay good. And that's why the soul doesn't resonate with bad. I think when we do something bad, it feels terrible. When we do something good, on the other hand, right? You give charity, you help someone else. When you study Torah, whatever it is, when we do something good, it resonates deeply and it feels so good. Why? Because the soul is reconnecting to its promise and to God's promise to it before it was sent to this world. Oh, that's right. Now this good deed reminds me of why I came. And that's why it resonates so profoundly and so beautifully, so sweetly with me, with my inner self. That's the soul. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because again, the soul knows that it's not a part of this world. Like Rabbi Steinsaltz often says, we may be in this world, but we're not of this world. And because we're not of this world, it has heavenly longings, heavenly cravings that we feel from time to time, cravings that someone that is totally worldly, that maybe animals, say, for example, don't have. I don't know if animals wake up in the morning of a spiritual awakening, or if animals start to cry for no reason. I don't think animals have that. Why? Because they're totally worldly. They're totally materialistic, physical. But we are spiritual beings. We are spiritual beings in a human experience. Again, as Rabbi Steinsaltz often says, he likes to use that expression that we're not, as many people think, we're not human beings in a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings in a human experience. Changes the whole perspective on life. So next time someone calls human beings, you should correct them. We are not human beings. We're spiritual beings in a human experience. But being divine beings or spiritual beings, we will have those spiritual cravings, just like that fire. And we will have those spiritual cravings that really remind us of who we essentially are. We're that fire, that piece of God that yearns to connect to God at all times. And then it's up to us, of course, to do something about it, to translate this into action. Just to have a craving and then not do anything about it won't satisfy the soul. The soul will want to do something about this. You know, Rabbi Hillel of Parish, which was quoted here, he speaks about the 4 colors of a flame, etc. But Rabbi Hillel of Parish gives the beautiful analogy of, and I'm sure it's happened to you. Have you ever been, for example, to a supermarket and you've heard a tune in the supermarket, out of the supermarket speakers, and you say to yourself, gosh, I know this music. I just don't know where I heard it from. And you're trying to figure out, I know the singer, I know the song. I can't, not today, thank God, we have Shazam in our phones, right? I have Shazam because it happens to me often. So you just Shazam it, and then all of a sudden the speaker comes, I mean the singer and the song appear on your screen. But Rabbi Hillel of Parich uses this parable way before Shazam was created. He lived some 250 years ago. But he uses this parable to explain the soul, that the soul was really charged with a song. Each one of us was charged to sing a song in this world. And to sing a song that harmonizes with God's song, with goodness. Now, every one of us has a different song to sing. We each have our own purpose in life. It's the purpose of the soul. Some people, their purpose is to really change the world. It's like an army, right? Some people, their purpose is to be a chef in the kitchens, in the army's kitchen. And some people it's to be pilots, and some people it's to be, I don't know, in the intelligence unit. Everyone has their own purpose. But that purpose is given an analogy of the song. Everyone has to sing their own song. And we come down to this world and we forget our song. We knew it very well in heaven. And we forget it sometimes because of the challenges of life, sometimes because of distractions. It could be for many different reasons, but we forget it. And then we see someone doing good. Then we study Torah, for example, or then we do a mitzvah. And all of a sudden we feel terribly good, but we also feel now this sense of longing and craving, and our soul wants more. And why is that? Again, because Rabbi Hillel of Parich says that now finally the song that we were implanted with met its counterpart, met its harmony through this good deed. It's like walking in that supermarket and hearing that song that you already know. It's a part of you. You know that. You know the tune of that goodness. And you just did good. So it struck a chord within you, literally. It struck that musical chord within you of your own song. And then you say to yourself, oh, I think I got it, but I can't remember it exactly. Now, if you don't capitalize on that moment, on that harmony that you just heard with your own internal song, then the song might disappear from your mind again and will leave you with this tremendous void. The more you capitalize on it, the more you say, gosh, I have this craving, let me do something about it, the more this song will be replayed in you. And the more your purpose will then be refined and will become clearer and clearer. And your song will eventually be as clear as could be. And you'll be able to sing it to the world, for the world to benefit from. And for you to benefit from the mission that you were charged with. That's the analogy that Rabbi Hillel of Parich gives to the soul. It's like a song again that we have forgotten, yet when we hear it through good deeds, it resonates so profoundly, we know what it is. We Shazam it, so to speak. And then that's an opportunity given to us by God to fulfill, to reconnect our purpose and then eventually fulfill it. But that all comes from the desire of the soul, from that fire that has all these types of cravings. Now, I will say just one more thing. I'd love to, I don't want this to be a monologue. I want to hear from you too. But I just want to say one more thing about the soul and the craving of the soul and how much, therefore, we have to pay attention to it. By the way, Rabbi Steinsaltz has a whole book about it called The Soul. I have it here. I can show it. But yeah, I have it here in Hebrew, but the cover is the same in English. You see, windows are the opening of the soul. The eyes are the opening of the soul. So the eyes are the window. What's the expression?
Window to the world.
Windows to the soul.
Window to the soul. So there you go. You have eyes on his book, The Soul. But in any case, one more thing about the soul that Rabbi Steinsaltz also very often speaks about is that when we see, it's interesting because it's very hard to figure out what that song is, and many people don't get it. Maybe sometimes it takes a whole lifetime to figure out what your song is. But there is one way that, by the way, is a common theme in this book. One way that we can know what our song is, what a unique purpose or unique song is simply by paying attention not to us, to ourselves, but paying attention to our surroundings. What does that mean? That very often, it's almost like Viktor Frankl put it, very often it's not what I want from life. The I very often obstructs the song of the soul. It's more what life wants from me. Sometimes we are placed in a situation where we don't want to be in. We are placed with people that we don't want to be in. We are placed in places that we don't want to be in. But we were placed there because God knows that that's where my song can be played. That's where my song needs to be played. In those places, with those people. And when we listen to that which is beyond us, that our soul can express itself best. That's one indication of how to use the soul and how to play its song. So in other words, just to be practical, and I'm speaking very abstract today, but just to be practical, sometimes, and I want to connect this to Passover that we just spoke about, but sometimes I'm in a social party. We don't go to social parties anymore, social distancing. But the day will come soon. Day will come soon. We'll be back at these bar mitzvahs and weddings. And some of us say to ourselves, and I'm like that, I mean, maybe I'm in the wrong business, but why go to the social party for all this schmooze that leads to nowhere and people looking over your shoulders anyway? And like, what's the point? But I say to myself, the way I've convinced myself over the years is that it's specifically maybe because I don't want to go, that I have to go. Because maybe my soul needs to actualize something, needs to touch one person, needs to connect to just one human being, one spiritual being, not human being, we just said that. One spiritual being. And that is why God is sending me to this place. So it's not what I want from this party, it's what the party wants from me. And the more I can overcome that ego, so to speak, the more I can be in tune with what God wants from me, what life wants from me, the more my soul can sing its song. That's really the big thing. By the way, I want to connect this to Passover, and I want to hear your thoughts, but there's a very big misconception, and I was thinking about it and ruminating on this Passover, but I think it's just so brilliant. There's a very big misconception about the splitting of the Red Sea. And that is that we celebrated last week, the very last day of Passover. And that is that people think that when God split the sea for us, we started on one end and ended up on the other end. And that's not true. The way the sea split is that it's split like a U. Maybe that's where the U-turn expression comes from. It's split literally like a U. We started on one beach, we went into the sea, and we came back to that very same beach. And that's why did God do this? Again, all this is in the Torah, it's not even in the Midrash. Why did God do this? So that we can see the Egyptians drowning, and then eventually also be able to take the treasures that were now drowned, that made us rich, the treasures that drowned with them. Okay? Now, on a spiritual level, on a Kabbalistic level, what's the purpose of having this U-turn? Why not just lead us to the other side of the sea? It would have made our journey to Israel maybe even shorter. Why? And the answer is because God wanted to teach us a lesson, and that is sometimes we have challenges, sometimes we have enemies from without or from within. These are the Egyptians. And if we have that faith and we jump in the sea and continue to do what we have to do, and focus on action like we so often speak about, on good deed, then seas will split and our enemies will be drowned. But then the second step of this healing process, or maybe of this purpose, is to go back to our enemies and find the treasures within them and look at them, not run away from them. Look at them and say, okay, those were enemies, but even in the enemy moments of life, even in those challenges, there are great treasures. And there's something that life needs to teach me, that challenge needs to teach me. So God made us go back to the same beach, to go and be able to find the treasures within our enemies, to be able to say to ourselves, oh, now I understand. That was the purpose. That's the blessing in this challenge. That's the treasure. That's the deeper level here of the splitting of the Red Sea. But again, it connects to what we're saying, that very often finding our purpose is not necessarily through the I. The I is that one single letter, not this I, but the I, or through the ego. Finding our purpose is specifically by letting go of our ego and asking, what does life want from me? Fine, I'm followed by enemies. Enemies are spiritual enemies, are running after me. I have to believe that there is a blessing in this. I have to do what I have to do. I have to focus on the deed. But I also have to know that there's great treasures within that enemy that God will show me one day. If I can just open myself to the blessings within the challenges, to the opportunities within those social parties that we spoke about, then I can find God and I can eventually find my purpose, the song of God within me too. That's the idea. I'd love to hear, again, I don't want this to be a monologue, so I want to hear your comments.
I've got a question and a comment.
Please, Amy.
Questions. The first one was, who's the rabbi who compared, what was the name, to the soul to a song?
Oh, Rabbi Hillel of Paritch. He's mentioned right here, Paritch. He was a friend/student of the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi.
And then what was the fourth level of the soul?
So the fourth level of that craving is called Nefesh Shokeka, like he calls it here, which means a soul that yearns. That's what it means. Nefesh Shokeka. Shokek means to yearn. But it yearns not for anything materialistic, again, but really just it yearns to yearn. It's like when you're, I don't know, in a love relationship, you just yearn to yearn. Just love to love. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a yearning to know your song.
That's right.
I think.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And then the comment that U-turn, I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
That when they crossed the sea, it wasn't a cross, it was U-turn.
That's correct. Yeah.
And, from the yogic perspective, it feels like it's coming home to ourselves.
Beautiful.
So we hold ourselves back.
Right.
What looks like an enemy, we're really our own worst enemies. But when we can overcome that, it's actually coming home to ourselves.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I don't know if you have this in yoga too, but of course it's a two-step journey. I didn't emphasize that enough. The first step is, just focus on action, continue to move forward. The Jews were stuck. Very often it happens to us also. We're stuck by our own personal enemies, emotional enemies. It could be bad habits, addictions, whatever it is. And they chase us. And on the other hand, in front of us, there's a sea and we see no future. We say, okay, fine. If we move forward, I don't see any redemption, in the future. And then God appears to us. It's exactly like the Jews felt, by the way. They were stuck. The Egyptians were chasing them. There was the Red Sea in front of them, and they didn't know what to do. According to the Midrash, they split into 4 groups. They started arguing. Some said, let's surrender. Just like some people say, let's surrender to my emotions, to my addictions, to my bad habits. I'll just live a life that's doomed. Some said, and another group of Jews said, no, let's not surrender to the Egyptians. Let's commit suicide. Let's go drown. Some people feel that tension so much within that that's the option that they pick. Some Jews said, you know what, let's fight back. Let's fight these Egyptians. We're able to overcome them. And that's sometimes the inclination too. We say, let's fight this enemy. We can overcome it, and let's face it in the head. But sometimes we're not emotionally equipped to fight. And not only that, sometimes the best way to deal with feelings is not to deal with them, because when we start dealing with them, then they overcome us with such emotion that they trap us with that emotion. But that was, again, another opinion among the Jewish people. Let's fight the Egyptians. Okay, all this is spiritual, of course. I mean, also physical, but it also has spiritual meaning. And then the fourth opinion was, let's pray to God. Some people say, you know what? I can't do anything. I'm just going to pray. But God also doesn't want you to pray. There's a time for prayer. Just to pray is to again, maybe surrender to passivity. God doesn't want you to be passive when it's time to move forward. So what does God do at that moment? He appears to Moses and he says to Moses, stop. Tell these 4 camps to stop. Neither of them are right. The best way to act right now is Daber el bnei Israel ve'isau, quoting the verse word for word, speak to the Jewish people, to the children of Israel, and tell them to travel forth. Go ahead. Just focus on action. Do what you need to do. Life is an ongoing journey, maybe a journey like climbing a mountain, but keep climbing. Just focus on what you have to do next, today, not next year, today. And then focus on what you have to do tomorrow. Travel forth. And as you travel forth, you'll all of a sudden realize that your sea will split. And if you move forward in that sea, then you'll see the Egyptians drowning. All of your enemies that you thought were such big threatening enemies, you'll see them drowning. If you can focus on your mission, focus on doing that which is right, you'll see your enemies drowning. And eventually, step 2, that's the second step now. After you've dedicated yourself to action, eventually God will also show you, not just how your enemies have drowned, but God will also show you that there were great treasures in those enemies, that they were placed in your life for a very good purpose, in order to enhance your song as best as possible. That's why I think it explains why sometimes, for example, cancer survivors, I know someone like that because he's a cancer survivor, what he does, he lives in Israel. I know a cancer survivor who survived leukemia. And now what he does is that he visits each and every Friday, he visits the local hospitals in Jerusalem, leukemia patients specifically, to cheer them up and to tell them, look, I was in that boat and you can be strong. And he gives them all sorts of tips. But how did he find that purpose? Because he had that enemy. Sometimes if you just fight through your leukemia like he did, and then move forward, God will eventually lead you to that U-turn, to be able to see that enemy and to see the good that it gave you, the purpose that it charged you with, the purpose of not going to leukemia patients and visiting them because of that personal experience. So that's the U-turn, the 2-step U-turn.
And Rabbi, speaking of the action that's required to move in that direction, as I recall, the sea didn't just split and then everybody walked across. Wasn't there one particular person that actually stepped into the sea before it split?
Right.
And then took another step and was actually up to their chest before. Right. So it was that action that someone took to move forward in solving the problem that precipitated the splitting of the sea. Right.
No, very good. That's right. It was Nachshon, the leader of the tribe of Judah, who's the one who eventually listened to God. We are a stiff-necked people. And we continue to argue, I think even after God told us, just travel forth. Except for one person, a true leader, Nachshon ben Aminadav was his name, the head of the tribe of Judah, who jumped in. And the sea didn't split for him immediately. It went all the way, according to the Midrash, up to his nose. Which is, again, the spiritual meaning is sometimes we move forward, we say, fine, we'll leave our enemies alone. We won't tackle them head to head. We'll do what we need to do today with all of the hardship that takes. And we won't feel like the sea is splitting. But Nachshon also didn't feel that the sea was splitting until the very last second, until he couldn't breathe anymore. And then the sea split, which was a sign God will come to your rescue. Don't you worry. The sea will split, but you got to give it your all first. You have to be as resilient as could be. Yeah. And that's the big challenge. That resilience, that persistence that is needed from us. I'm going to share with you something very, very, very personal, but speaking of the splitting of the Red Sea, one of my moments of awakening, of maybe the deepest awakening in life, was at the age of 16. At the age of 16, and like any good teenager, I had many questions of faith, questions of turmoil, of direction. And I wasn't in such a good place mentally. And all of a sudden, I went to sleep at night and I had a dream. I had a dream with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. And I find myself in his headquarters in 770 in Crown Heights, in a Hasidic gathering, with thousands upon thousands of Hasidim, listening to him speak from a table where he sat alone. It was a wide table. He was at the center of that table. And I walk into this hall. The table is far away from me, and I can't reach it because the room is packed. And all of a sudden, the Rebbe sees me coming in my dream, and emotions come. And I'm carried by all these Hasidim on top of them and land right in front of the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe doesn't say a word, but the Rebbe then looks at me with these penetrating eyes and turns around. And he shows me behind him a painting of the Red Sea with the verse, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people and tell them to move forth, the verse that we just quoted many, many times. He shows me the painting, turns back to me in this dream, and he says to me, "Nu, az tisa," with a big smile, saying, "Nu, just go ahead, just move forth." And I woke up. And it was one of the most awakening moments of my life, because it really taught me the secret that we're speaking about. Very often we're so stuck and we have so many voices, sometimes 4 voices, sometimes even more voices in our minds. And the only solution is just to move forward, just to do what you need to do. Just go, do, and do good. If you have to come out, if you're in a paralyzed state and and you don't know what to do, you don't have a plan for the day, so go visit the sick, go help someone in need. There's plenty of people in our broken world that need help. Do that mitzvah, and that will eventually split your own seed. It's a simple idea if you think about it, but it's also a very, very profound one. Just move forward. And the song of your soul will then play.
Rabbi, did he actually have that painting in his office, or this was just something?
No, it was on the wall of that hall.
In your dream, but in actuality, he had the painting?
In actuality, no, he didn't have that painting. I'll tell you that, the verse appeared like 1,000,000 times. On and on and on and on that painting.
Wow.
Yeah. This was after his passing. What,
Thanks
2 years after something?
Sharing that, Rabbi.
Yeah. But anyhow, sometimes we need reminders of that. So he came and gave me a reminder, but it's true. Anyhow. And that's how a soul can, but going back, that's how a soul can finally satisfy those 4 levels of craving that we're speaking about, just by action.
Wow.
Okay, any other comment before we read maybe just one more line? Anyone? No? Okay, Diana, maybe one more line. This is the dissolution of the soul.
Dissolution of the soul, Kelot Hanafesh, of which scripture speaks. Love of God at its highest level is called Kelot Hanafesh, dissolution of the soul. The soul desires to fuse with the divine, despite the fact that such a union would spell the end of its existence as a distinct entity. So great is the soul's love for God that it consumes its very being.
Right. And by the way, we each have that soul. What does this mean? That's the highest level of Klot HaNefesh. In a way, it's what the Midrash speaks about. During the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, God himself uttered the first 2 commandments. And then Moses uttered the next 8. Why did Moses utter the next 8 and God only spoke the first 2? That's because the Midrash says that when God uttered the first commandment, our souls expired. That voice of God just hit such a deep chord that our soul felt like, that's it. We have to leave our bodies. We have to reunite again. It's like that flame wanting to reunite with the big fire. And when we finally heard it, our souls expired. And then again, so God had to come and revive us. And then he spoke again, the 2nd commandment, and that happened again. And then God had to revive us again. And then we said to Moses, you know what, you continue to speak because we can't take this anymore. Our souls are leaving our body each time. Now, in a way, we might have that experience each time we meet something, we have a spiritual awakening. Or we meet someone tremendously spiritual, or we, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, for example, that we spoke about, or some Yom Kippur, sometimes it happens to us, or sometimes it happens to us just driving down the highway and having a deep spiritual awakening. But sometimes it feels like our soul wants to leave our body. We're not made of this world. Again, we might be in this world, but we're not of this world. And our soul knows this. Our soul, therefore, doesn't want to deal with this world. And it just wants to have Klot HaNefesh, like this is called. The leaving the dissolution of the soul. Wants to go back to its source. And by the way, speaking of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but before he gave the deepest Hasidic discourses, he spoke a lot each and every Shabbat. And before he gave those deep Hasidic discourses, what's called Ma'amarim, he would wear a handkerchief on his hand. You see that in videos, that he would prepare and roll a handkerchief on his hand. Why? Because when he spoke those deep Hasidic discourses, his soul was in a different place. And he had to stay down here in this world to connect somehow to this world. So he had a handkerchief, something very materialistic, on his hand to be able to make sure that he stays down. By the way, the cardiologist of the Rebbe speaks of the story of how the Rebbe had a heart attack in 1978, I believe. And when he was able to go back to give those Hasidic discourses and be again with his students, he was monitored. His heart was monitored. His heart was monitored in his office upstairs by the doctors. And he would go downstairs where that big hall was and give his Hasidic discourses. At one point, shortly after his heart attack, the doctors come rushing down from the office to see what happened to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was giving his Hasidic discourse as if nothing had happened. And they couldn't believe it. Why? Because the monitor upstairs showed that straight line as if the Rebbe was dead. And he was just speaking, giving his Hasidic discourse. Almost a physiological proof that when he was giving, when he allowed his soul then to again express itself in the highest ways and verbalize that which he verbalized, he wasn't in this world anymore. It was a wonder, remains a wonder until this day. But in a way, that happens to each and every one of us too. Sometimes we experience moments where we want klot nefesh. We just want to get out of this world. And then God reminds us, no, your mission, you were born. I know you're not of this world. It's true, soul. You're right. You belong to that big fire, but you were charged with a mission. So go back down and do that which you need to do. And each time you do good, each time you listen to what life wants from you, not what you want from life, and you try and actualize those moments, then your soul will feel better and better. Your cravings will be satisfied. And then the song of the soul will finally be able to voice itself to the world and finally be able to fulfill its mission from the get-go. And that's really the purpose of it all. Yes, we may have klot nefesh, but it's specifically when the soul works its wonders in this world with the movement forward, with the Ber B'nai Yisrael V'Yisrael, that we can fulfill each and every one of our purpose in life.